November 1942. Stalingrad. Soviet forces launch Operation Uranus. Encircle the German Sixth Army. Victory tastes sweet for exactly 3 days. Then reports arrive from frontline commanders. Germans are fielding new heavy tanks. Tigers. Panthers. Ferdinands. Soviet 76mm guns bounce shells off their armor like pebbles. Towed artillery is being overrun, abandoned, destroyed. Engineers struggle with fortified German positions in urban combat. The Red Army needs a solution. Fast. Soviet designers receive an impossible order. Create a heavy self-propelled gun capable of destroying anything on the battlefield. Use existing components. Make it simple to produce. Have the first prototype ready in 25 days. They deliver in exactly 25 days. 4 months later, mass production begins. 10 months after that, 700 SU-152 roll-off assembly lines. And at Kursk in July 1943, one battery ambushes German Ferdinands, the most heavily armored vehicles in the war, and destroys them with single shots. The SU-152 earns a nickname that day: Zverobóy, Beast Slayer. But the story of how this weapon came to exist and what it did to men inside tanks is far darker than the nickname suggests. Before we go further, understand this. What you're about to hear isn't glorification of Soviet engineering. This is documented military history, design records, combat reports, crew testimonies, battlefield analysis. The SU-152 was never designed to fight tanks. It was designed to destroy bunkers. But when you fire a 152mm high-explosive shell weighing 50 kilograms at an armored vehicle, the results are catastrophic regardless of original intent. If we don't share these stories, or as we forget that desperation drives innovation and innovation drives killing efficiency. So hit subscribe. Make sure these lessons stay loud. The story begins November 19th, 42. Operation Uranus succeeds. German Sixth Army encircled at Stalingrad. But during horrific fighting in the city, Soviet forces encounter something new. German heavy armor. Tigers with 88mm guns. Panthers with sloped armor. Later, Ferdinands with 200mm of frontal protection. Soviet 76mm tank guns are inadequate. Shells bounce off. Penetration is rare. Kills are rarer. But the new German heavy tanks weren't the only problem. They were concerning. But the real issue was something else entirely. Frontline units were severely underpowered and ill-equipped for the new way of combat. They had artillery and combat engineers, but almost all Soviet guns and howitzers at the time were towed, either by artillery tractors or horses. Early 76mm guns on tanks didn't have enough power to blast fortifications. And with combat now in cities, they needed such firepower beside them. Add to this deep snow, no roads, shattered city streets, counterattacks. Vulnerable towed guns became increasingly less effective, often abandoned after crews either died or had to retreat facing ambush or counterattack. Leave their weapon behind. Soviets already had this issue in the Winter War, when they struggled with heavily fortified Finnish bunkers. The KV-2 with 152mm howitzer was already built for that purpose. But the huge turret with enormous gun worked catastrophically in practice. Made the tank too heavy, especially too top-heavy, too complicated to produce. So to solve this issue, Soviet Army began developing a heavy self-propelled gun. Would carry powerful 152mm ML-20 howitzer. Offer protection for crew, still be quick and simple to build. Music. And when we say began developing, the first prototype designated Object 236, or KV-14, was built in just 25 days. The most simple and cost-effective design was chosen, using KV-1S chassis, slamming already existing gun on already existing hull. Frantic testing began. As need was so critical, after just mere weeks the design was accepted into service. Production began immediately. It's remarkable how Soviets went from problem to solution to mass production in such rapid time. Just 4 months, from brainstorming new concept to mass production. In next 10 months, they would produce some 700 SU-152s, or essentially this was a 45-ton vehicle built around huge howitzer. Fired two-piece ammunition weighing little under 50 kilograms, 110 pounds. Standard high-explosive shell had around 6 kilograms of TNT, quite enough to obliterate a bunker. Level a smaller house completely with one shot. Because of weight, two-piece arrangement, and quite cramped loader's position, rate of fire was only about 2 rounds per minute. Also could carry only 20 rounds. But it compensated with single-hit complete destruction of most targets. It wouldn't wait long to see combat. Battle of Kursk approached. Today, known as history's largest tank battle, SU-152s were formed into independent self-propelled artillery regiments. Crews hastily trained. First 12 sent to Kursk. July 6, 1943. Battery of SU-152s lay in ambush. A new German heavy tank destroyers, Ferdinands, later renamed Elephants, approached. Among most heavily armored vehicles of war, 200 millimeters of frontal armor, weighing 25 tons more than SU-152. At 800 meters, first Ferdinand was hit, set ablaze. There was no protection against heavy high-explosive shells. A 152 millimeter shell would literally blow tank apart, collapsing whole armor plates, taking out crew with explosive blast and spalling, without even needing to penetrate tank. There was even recorded instance where it hit and flipped over a Panzer IV. Later came even heavier armor-piercing shells. But not for fighting tanks. Doesn't matter if it gets hit with HE or AP, it's going to disintegrate anyway. AP shells were more like concrete piercing. For destroying fortifications more effectively, go in deep, then explode with devastating effect. A problem with Ferdinands, however, was although they were extremely heavily armored, hit with such powerful high-explosive shell would most often kill crew with blast and spalling of armor, but usually not completely destroy vehicle by igniting ammunition and fuel. During night, Germans would recover most knocked-out Ferdinands, put them back into action next day with new crew. Later, Soviets were ordered to fire at German tanks until complete destruction. Few days later, 3 more Ferdinands were knocked out, among new Panthers, Tigers, and Panzer IVs. Here, after effectively destroying German animal name tanks, SU-152 got its nickname, Zverobóy, Beast Slayer. However, fighting was heavy and chaotic. Enormous losses on both sides. SU-152 was never designed as tank destroyer like Germans did with their self-propelled guns. But who would have said extremely heavy high-explosive shell would have such nice side effect? After Kursk, they would see much more action against German heavy armor. Their effectiveness was shown. Their armor was quite substantial, but soon became inadequate as war progressed. Whole front and casemate had between 65 and 75 millimeters, sloped at 30 degrees. Similar to KV-1's protection. Sides were flat at 60 millimeters, rear 30 millimeters. This meant it was protected to some degree from frontal hits. But German 88s were still very deadly, even head-on at long ranges. Germans were now fielding improved and almost twice as powerful long 88s on heavy tank destroyers. Quite a challenge for long-range duels. They were much more accurate, better optics, quicker to reload, devastating armor-piercing ammunition with explosive filler. SU-152, on other hand, was much slower to engage. Slower to aim, not very accurate. Firing in high arc, extremely slow to reload and fire again with corrections. Although they were initially designed to lead attack and support infantry directly, tactics sometimes changed. Turned out they were often more valuable staying behind, ambushing enemy, supporting first wave of infantry and tanks from about 200 meters back. When they got held up by fortifications, SU-152s would come, make them not exist anymore. In urban combat, they were also appreciated. Instead of infantry clearing buildings, SU-152 would simply collapse them, together with their defenders. at first, didn't have secondary armament for close anti-infantry protection. Expected to be handled by crew with PPSH submachine guns and grenades. Later, most got 12.7mm DSHK heavy machine gun en roof, for anti-air protection, which they could also turn on enemy infantry and lightly armored vehicles. It had 12-cylinder diesel engine, giving around 600 horsepower, wide tracks, quite good mobility for 45-ton vehicle. But components worked at their limits with this weight. Fighting compartment was quite cramped. Guns breech. Ammo. Internal fuel tanks taking most space. And yeah, ammo and fuel tanks were inside fighting compartment, one beside another. One fuel tank was right beside driver, who couldn't leave his position if gun was not traversed to left, and breech cleared his way. So, heaven forbid that something like hot piece of metal with explosive comes through your armor. Music. Inside were 5 crew members, driver, gunner. Loader sat in line, one behind another on left side of gun's breech. On other side were breech operator and commander. Firing gun was unique but not quite pleasant experience. Large muzzle brake was added to help with immense recoil. Range was up to 6,000 meters, but accuracy degraded already after 800. However, SU-152 was from beginning intended as stopgap solution. Problem was it was mounted on aging KV-1S chassis, already unreliable and under-armored for later stage of war, but its weapon and concept were very effective. So Soviets now took new IS platform, essentially made same but improved weapon. ISU-152. Armor was biggest upgrade. Now between 90 and 100 millimeters at front. Could now approach targets directly. Well protected. Destroy them with same powerful gun. With lessons learned in urban combat, they fought alongside infantry squads with submachine guns, usually followed by one sniper, sometimes a flamethrower. This way they provided close protection to assault guns against German Panzerfausts, effectively cleared heavily defended cities. DSHK anti-aircraft gun also proved handy in urban combat. Protection from top attacks coming from buildings. Although high explosive shells were effective against tanks, higher velocity guns were still better for accuracy at long ranges. So by end of a war, Soviets decided to try some of these guns on ISU-152. Made variants known as BM, standing for high power. They used a number of different guns, most impressive probably being Object 246. Armed with BL-8, able to pierce over 200 millimeters of armor at 2,000 meters. Soviets actually developed entire family of assault guns and tank destroyers during war, each built with specific purpose in mind. SU-76 was first and most produced, a small and lightly armored self-propelled gun, mainly for infantry support, but vulnerable to almost everything on battlefield. Crews had lovely nickname for it, Suka, meaning bitch, thanks to its thin armor. Constant breakdowns, tendency to get them killed. Then there was SU-85, later SU-100, both designed specifically to deal with German tanks. But heavy platforms like SU-152 and ISU-152 were all in one vehicle. When you wanted something on battlefield to cease to exist, ISUs would gradually replace old SU-152s by war's end. Continued to be produced up to 1947. Around 4,000 units made. Senior Sergeant Ivan Katakov, SU-152, commander with 1,529th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment, described engaging a Tiger near Kursk in a 1978 interview recorded by Soviet military historians. We were positioned in a tree line about 700 meters from the road, he said. The Tiger came around the corner. Massive, terrifying. Our loader was shaking so badly he could barely lift the shell. I told him, one shot, that's all we get. If we miss, we're dead. The gunner fired. The shell hit the Tiger's front glacis. The entire front plate collapsed inward. The tank didn't explode, didn't burn, just stopped, like someone had switched it off. Later we approached. The crew inside was dead. All 5 of them. The blast had killed them instantly, even though the shell never penetrated. That's when I understood what this gun could do. The concept of assault guns ended quickly after war, replaced by main battle tank. However, self-propelled heavy artillery remains in use today, but now focused on long-range fire support, or rather than direct assaults. The SU-152 represents a unique moment in military history, when desperation forced innovation, when engineers built weapons in 25 days that would define Soviet armored doctrine. Today, surviving SU-152 EOS exist in museums across Russia and former Soviet states. Kubinka Tank Museum outside Moscow, Central Museum of Armed Forces, Museum of Military Equipment in Verkhnaya Pishma. Visitors can see the cramped fighting compartment, the massive 152mm gun, the armor that was thick enough to approach targets but thin enough to be vulnerable. But they can't feel the recoil when gun-fired, can't smell cordite and diesel fuel mixing in confined space, can't hear the catastrophic impact of 50-kilogram shell hitting enemy armor. Most importantly, they can't see faces of 5-man crews who operated these weapons, who fired at targets 800 meters away knowing one shot was all they'd get before return fire arrived, who watched German tanks literally disintegrate under their shells, who died when 88mm rounds punched through their armor and detonated fuel and ammunition stored beside them. This isn't ancient history. This happened 80 years ago. Some SU-152 crew members lived into 21st century, carried memories of Kursk, of Berlin, of comrades who didn't survive. The lesson is clear. Desperation drives innovation. Time constraints force simplicity. And sometimes weapons designed for one purpose become legendary for entirely different reasons. SU-152 was designed to destroy bunkers. It became famous for destroying tanks. Because when you fire 50 kilograms of high explosive at anything, results are catastrophic. If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe right now, drop a comment below, and let us know your thoughts on SU-152 and Soviet assault gun development during World War II. Thanks for watching, and please share this video with anyone interested in military engineering and desperate innovation under pressure. These stories of weapons born from necessity must never be forgotten. These voices must stay loud.